Hello, oops. Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar on the top Bay Area schools, high schools in the Bay Area. So before we get started, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for coming, and I hope that the information in this webinar is helpful to you. How this webinar is going to go is that it's going to last about 35 to 40 minutes, and then afterwards we'll have a Q&A session. However, you can ask your questions whenever you want. Just type it into the chat box down there, and we'll try to get it to as many as we can during the Q&A session. A little introduction about myself. My name is Kate Pastelnik. I currently work for Think Academy, and I also have Judy Lee with me, who also works at Think Academy, and she'll be helping me answer the questions during the Q&A session. Now, one of the things that the Academy has been working on these last 3 years, on top of providing education resources for and classes for students in K-8, is research on schools in the Bay Area. We've collected information and feedback from parents and students and done our own research, and that's what makes this webinar possible. So yes, before we get started, I just want to give a little plug there. We provide information on Bay Area public schools, such as academic statistics, key characteristics, and more in our Facebook group called Bay Area Schools and Parents Discussion. You can join that group by scanning the QR code down there below. Hopefully at time before, but if not, that's totally okay. We'll have the QR code posted again during the Q&A session slide. But without further ado, let's get into our webinar. So for how this is going to go is we're going to introduce each school individually, give a brief introduction of their information, and then cover one key characteristic that makes the school special from the rest, and then information on their academics. And then after we're done going through each of the schools, we'll have a couple about 9 comparison statistics slides where you can look at the schools side by side, get a little good visual to see where they stand in each category, and then obviously our Q&A session at the end. So for the schools that are going to be covered today, it's going to be Lynbrook, Saratoga, Mission San Jose, Gunn, and Monta Vista. We were going to cover some other schools such as Cupertino, Palo Alto, Leland. However, we only have time for 5 schools today, but if there is enough support for those schools or any other school, we will definitely cover them in a future webinar. But before we get started with our first information slide, we do have 3 poll questions that are being put up right now that you guys can answer throughout the webinar. The first one is going to be what grade your child is in. The second one is going to be what grade level you're most interested in. And the next one is what school district that your child is in. So you can just answer those if you want throughout the webinar, whenever it feels comfortable. But now let's get into our first information slide, which is the rankings by niche and US News. These are statewide rankings, just for your information. It's not national, it's just for the state of California. And for the key point, as you can see when looking in this data, is that for the US News ranking and the niche ranking, it is almost inverted, where Mission San Jose did get the top spot out of the 5 for the US News ranking at 5 and 5th in the state. But for niche, it got rated as the lowest out of the 5 at 62nd. But when you look at the niche rankings, the 2 schools that it rated the top was Gunn High at 2nd in the state and Saratoga High at 3rd in the state. But when you look at the the US News ranking, they actually rated Saratoga and Gunn High the lowest at 21 and 20 respectively. And when we analyzed this data, one thing we realized was that the US News actually focuses more on like the hard numbers, such as Ivy League and UC admission rates and SAT, ACT scores, while niche focuses more on the overall school experience. This can be the amount of AP classes they offer, their extracurriculars, if they have any individual school programs that make them special, all the way until like their teacher to student ratio. Niche does take a lot of consideration at the teacher to student ratio of each school when making their rankings, and even it goes as far as the location of the school. How do they like the city that the school is in? So those are just some things to take into consideration when comparing these schools and figuring out which one that you like the most, and figuring out which topics you find the most important. And then the second main topic for this ranking is that Mission San Jose did see an increase by US News, and Lynbrook saw an increase from Niche. They both had an increase of about 3. Now for our first school, it is Lynbrook. And the main key point that that kind of sums up Lynbrook is that they are very successful in math competitions and overall a pretty well-rounded school. As you can see in the previous slide, both US News and Niche did rank them pretty evenly at 14 and 12, which are very good. But as I said before, they're very successful in math competitions. As of late, we're going to get into that information in the key characteristics slide. However, the one weakness that we saw from Lynbrook is that the school did see a decrease in the UC Berkeley and UCLA admission percentage, especially for UC Berkeley. Now, just a little spoiler, all of the schools did see an increase for UC Berkeley. It was across the board due to COVID-19. However, Lynbrook's was especially noticeable, and we'll get to that down here. As you can see, for UC Berkeley in 2019, they had almost 30% matriculation rate into Berkeley, but it dropped by 21% all the way down to almost 9% in 2020. So all schools did see a drop, but it is 21%, so it is a little bit more than the other ones. And then UCLA dropped as well, but not as much. It was 17% down to 13, almost 14% in 2020. Now for their other key characteristic, or the brief introduction, their teacher to student ratio is 1 to 23. To get a little comparison, the California average is 1 to 23, so they're right on pace for the average. And then they also are focused on hiring more teachers with advanced degrees. For last year, 2020, 2021, 93% of teachers held advanced degrees, which is a 25% increase from last year. And then 94% of their teachers have 3 or more years of teaching experience. And now that we got over this one, let's get to the next slide, which is where do they go after graduation? And then when you look at this chart, all these charts for this category are pulled from the school profile. That's where we got them from. And so when you look at the key points, there definitely is more interest in the UC system than the CSU system. This is across the board with all the schools, but you can definitely see here with Lynbrook, 34% of students went to a UC, only 10% went to a CSU. But the highest category here is the out of state, which is 44%. Almost half of the students decide to go out of state, whether it's a public one like Ohio State or a private one like Boston University. They definitely like going out of state. And then the last one is that there was not as much popularity for this school for community colleges, only 7%. So now we'll move on to the next slide, which is their competitions and awards. Like we just said, recently Lynbrook students have seen a lot of success in math competitions. Last year, 5 students received USAMO or US Math Olympiad Awards, which was more than any other school in the Bay Area. Now, just to get you a comparison of some other Bay Area schools, Gunn received 1, Saratoga received 3, and then when you even look at the private Bay Area schools, Nueva and Harker received 2, and then Basis, who is known for its math competitions and like their specialty in math, they received 3. So I guess if I could put one like take-home point from Lynbrook is that it's a very good school for students who are interested in math and especially interested for math competitions. As you can see, as of late, they're doing better than their direct peer group and even doing better than some private schools in the Bay Area. And for the last point for this slide, there were 4 students this year who received the Scientific Genius Award, and one of them was from Lynbrook. So now that we cover the competitions and awards, we're going to get into the academics. So for Lynbrook's academics, one main point is that despite the matriculation rates dropping last year from UC Berkeley and UCLA, Lynbrook did see their academic numbers for the ACT and NMSF, which is National Merit Semifinalists, increase. Their ACT score went up from 31.7 to 33.14 from 2019 to 2020. And then a really good point here is their National Merit Semifinalists almost doubled from 2020 to 2021. It was 40, and now this year it was at 79. Now looking at their other academic stats, their SAT score was 1434. And then for another key point is that their GPA is actually, they have more students with a 4.0 GPA than a 3 to 3.49. As you can see right here, 21.2% of students had a 4.0 GPA, which is definitely a high percentage. And then over half of their students had a 3.5 to 3.99, with 16.1% having a 3 to 3.49. And just rounding out their academic academics, their AP tests, 94% received a 3 or higher, 47% received a 5, and then their average score was 4.51. And for their California Assessment of Student Performance, or CAASP, 79 were college ready in English, while 82 were college ready in math. And then lastly, the number of AP courses they offered was 17. So that concludes the slide for Lynbrook. Now for our next slide here, we are going to be talking about Saratoga. One key point that we have received from parents is that Saratoga is seen as a private school type of public school. Now what this means is that it offers different pathways for students to get ahead in academic areas. There are some other private schools such as Nueva and Harker that do this as well. It's not the same, but it is slightly similar. So that's why it gets the private school type of public school. But looking at their other key stats for the brief introduction, their teacher to student ratio is 1 to 19, which is lower than the state average, and 93% of teachers have 3+ years of teaching experience. Getting a quick look at their matriculation rates, Berkeley's rates did drop, but not as much as Lynbrook. It went from 19% in 2019 to about 14% in 2020. However, their UCLA admission rates actually increased from about 0.7% from 14.5 in 2019 to 15.22% in 2020. So now let's get into where do they go after graduation. When looking at where Saratoga students go after graduation, one main key point here is that Saratoga definitely has the highest interest in going to a community college out of the other schools by a decent amount. As you can see from this pie chart here from their school profile for the class of 2020, 20% of students in 2020 decided to go to a community college. Now, obviously, there is nothing wrong with that. There are two really great community colleges in the Bay Area. West Valley College is right next to Saratoga. They're ranked 6th in the state, and Didnt College, which is not too far away, is ranked 13th in the state. So that is just a personal preference for the class of 2020 for Saratoga High School. And then when looking at the other stats, the non-California place in the pie chart definitely dominates at about 42% when you combine the private and public for non-California universities. And then their UC had about 18%, and then their CSU is even lower than Lynbrook at 5.6%. But let's get into their key characteristic. For their key characteristic, they like to title these called special school programs, and these are programs designed to help students get ahead. Their first one is their generic one called the College Advantage. Now what this is seniors with a 3.5 unweighted GPA or higher, they can opt to take only college courses and still receive the diploma upon the completion of their graduation requirements. So essentially this lets students get ahead and receive their degree quicker. Students can graduate college as quickly as a half year, even a full year early, depending on how many classes they take. For the next one is the Media Arts program. And what this one does is it focuses on English and social studies classes, and it develops student skills in media-related performance and production technology. Furthermore, students receive hands-on experience with video, animation, graphic design, and so on. And these courses also satisfy graduation requirements for 9 through 12 English, 10 through 11 social studies, 12th grade government, and multiple arts-based requirements as well. So this is definitely for art students, allows them to get ahead and get that hands-on experience before college even starts. And then for their last one, which is STEM, it is called Project Lead the Way. And essentially this is 4 project-based learning courses that focus on teaching students different engineering topics. The curriculum is actually independent from the standard engineering courses. And because of this, it allows students to take the first 3 introductory classes without any prior engineering class experience. So as you can see, the key point for Saratoga High School is that they want to help students get ahead for college. They have their generic College Advantage program for students who do not know exactly what they want to do yet for college, which most students don't. So they have the College Advantage. And then for ones that are for the media and arts, they have that. And then they also have ones for STEM as well. But let's get into their academics. For Saratoga High's academics, there was a slight increase in both the ACT and SAT scores. As you can see, their ACT went up from 30.9 to 32.2, and then their SAT went up by 6 points from 2019 to 2020. However, the one stat that is also noticeable is that they did have a decrease in their national merit semifinalists. It dropped from 51 in 2020 to 30 in 2021. When looking at their other academics, they have a different way for GPA. They measure it by weighted, and they have categories for above 4.0, 4.25 plus is 26.2%, 40 to 4.24 is 24.5%, and then for 3.7 to 3.99, it is 13.3%. For their AP test, 91.5 received a 3 or higher. And for their CAASP, it's about even, 75% college ready for English and 74% college ready in math. And their number of AP courses is slightly more than Lynbrook, it's at 19. But now that we have covered Saratoga High School, let's get into our next school. And our next school is Mission San Jose, which is located in Fremont, not San Jose. But for a brief introduction, one key point about the school is that it is one of the top Bay Area schools for Ivy League admission. We'll get more into that in their key characteristic. However, their overall matriculation rates for UC Berkeley and UCLA did drop from 2019 to 2020. Mission San Jose and Lynbrook were the only two schools out of these 5 that saw their rates drop for both categories. But when you look at their teacher to student ratio, it is 1 to 25, so slightly above the California average. And then 93% of their teachers had 3+ years of teaching experience. And as you can see for the matriculation rates, Berkeley dropped by about 8% from 22 to 14, and then UCLA dropped by about 3.5 from 11.88 to 8.36. But now let's get into where they go after graduation. So for where they go after graduation, UC schools remain the most popular choice. Even though their matriculation rates did drop, they still saw 180, 190 students going to UCs. And then we had a little bit over 100 going to out of state, whether it's public or private. And then for CSU, private, and community college, those were not as popular. But now let's get into our next slide, which is their key characteristic, which is their Ivy League numbers. So in 2020, 16 students at Mission San Jose were admitted to Harvard, MIT, Stanford, and other prestigious private universities. A little bit of a breakdown from their school profile. They had 1 student for Columbia, 1 student for Harvard, 5 for Cornell, 4 for MIT, 2 for Stanford, and 3 for the University of Pennsylvania. And just to give you guys a better comparison for Mission San Jose to their direct competition, this stat is from the Polaris database, where they track the number of students that get into Harvard, Princeton, and MIT for each school. This one's for 2018, which was the newest year that they had. Mission San Jose had 9, Gunn had 7, Lynbrook had 6, Saratoga and Monta Vista had 4 each. So as you can see, for the last couple of years, Mission San Jose has definitely been a very strong school for Ivy League admission. But let us get into their academics. So for their academics, one key point is that they did have a high SAT average score despite their lower percentage of 4.0 GPA earners. Their SAT score is 1450, which is the highest among the 5. But they do, for their 4.0 GPA earners, it is only 5.25%, which is a good amount lower than Lynbrook. For their other academics, they did see their ACT scores go up by 2 points from 2019 to 2020, 31 and now 33. And their NMSF, National Merit Semifinalists, also increased by 7 from 2020 to 2021, 57 and now 64. And just to round out their academics, 92% of students received a 3 or higher on their AP tests, and the average score was 4.1 out of 5. And then for their CAASP, both were 80% or above, which is very strong. 80% were college ready in English, and 81% were college ready in math. And then the number of AP classes offered were more than both Lynbrook and Saratoga at 21. So that is it for Mission San Jose High School. Now we're going to get into our next school, which is Gunn High School. So a brief introduction of Gunn High School. If you thought that Mission San Jose had a lot of AP classes at 21, well, Gunn High School actually has the most AP courses out of the 5 schools. We'll get into what are those AP courses and how many there actually are in their key characteristics slide. But it is due to the fact that there are a lot of added art options on top of the standard STEM courses. And they even have more offered STEM courses than their competitors as well, especially for physics. And then another key characteristic that we wanted to touch upon is that for over the last about 10 years, there has been a stigma in the Bay Area that Gunn High their students struggle with like stress and academic pressure more than their competitors. However, when we looked at the data from the Healthy Kids Survey, we did notice that those numbers decreased throughout the years, and we'll get it more into that in the key characteristics slide as well. But more for their brief introduction, their teacher to student ratio is 1 to 17, which is very low. One of the main reasons why Niche ranks Gunn so highly, second this year in the state and first last year in the state, was because they do like that student to teacher ratio being lower. It adds more of a personalized education experience for these students. And then for more of their brief introduction, 93% of students or teachers, sorry, had 3+ years of teaching experience. And then for their matriculation rates, Berkeley did drop by about 9% from almost 21.79% to 12.66%. And then their UCLA rates actually went up by about 1.5 percentage from 12.45% in 2019 to almost 14% in 2020. Now that we've covered the brief introduction, let's get into where do Gunn High School students go after graduation. So for where they go after graduation is that they do have an overwhelming interest for out-of-state universities, very similar to Lynbrook. About 44% of students went to an out-of-state school, while about 18% went to a UC, 12%-ish went to private schools in California, about 11% to community college, and around 5% to the CSUs. So now let's get into some of the key characteristics of Gunn, which is their AP course information. So as we said before, on top of math, science, English, Gunn offers an abundance of AP courses in arts-related fields as well. When you look at their arts-based AP courses, they include art history, 2D art, 3D art, studio art, and music theory. They also have a lot of language-based AP courses as well, the most out of all of them. They have 5: French, German, Japanese, Mandarin, and Spanish. And then some other notable AP courses are psychology and human geography. The only other school to offer psychology and human geography is Mission San Jose. And then for Gunn, they're the only school to offer German, 3D art, and they also have more like physics AP course offered than their competitors. But now that we covered the course information, let's get into the Healthy Kids Survey. So for their Healthy Kids Survey results, when looking at the data in key categories such as sadness, stress, and reasons for absence, Gunn's numbers compare similarly to other top schools in the Bay Area. The schools that we are comparing directly are Mission San Jose and Saratoga. We wanted to include Lynbrook and Monta Vista as well, but the Fremont Union High School District, where they're from, did not include the numbers. So we have it from the Palo Alto District, which is Gunn, the Fremont Unified School District, very similar name for Mission San Jose, and the Los Gatos Saratoga School District, which where Saratoga is in. And for the reasons for absence, felt sad, stressed, or anxious among grade 11 students. 12% was for Gunn and 10% for Mission San Jose. So very similar numbers. And then when you look at the felt sad or stressed in general over the last 12 months among grade 11 students, Gunn had 36%, Saratoga 35%, Mission San Jose 35% as well. So as you can see, the numbers are very similar because the numbers for Gunn has dropped. We just wanted to touch on that just so you don't have that stigma in your head when you're looking at these schools. The numbers are very similar to its competitors. But now that we've covered the Healthy Kids Survey results, let's get into the academics. So for Gunn High School's academics, one main point is, like we said before, they offer a wide variety of AP courses. As you can see at the bottom, they offer 26, which is 5 more than the second rated one, which is Mission San Jose at 21. And then their SAT and ACT scores are lower than the other schools. As you can see, 2019, it was 28.9, and that dropped a little bit to 27.5 in 2020 for the ACT. For the SAT, their scores dropped a little bit as well, from 1377 in 2019 to 1357. in 2020. But looking at the other academics for their GPA, theirs is done a little bit differently. It's unweighted, but it's they don't have a 4.0 category, just 3.76 to 4. About half the students receive that. And then for 3.51 to 3.75 and 3.01 to 3.5, that's the same, 19.5% of the students. When looking at the national merit semifinalists, it's about the same, 35 in 2020, 34 in 2021. And for AP tests, 90% received a score of 3 or higher, and then 43% received a 5. For the CAASP, 71% were college ready in English and 68 were college ready in math. So now that we have covered Gunn High School, let's get into our last and final school. And our last and final school is Monta Vista. For a brief introduction on Monta Vista, one key point that separates them from the other schools is that in terms of extracurricular, Monta Vista has a very strong business program, DECA specifically. We'll get more into that in a minute. And looking at their other information for the brief introduction, their teacher to student ratio is 1 to 25, which is slightly above the California average. And then 94% of teachers had 3+ years of teaching experience. Now, when looking at their matriculation rates for 2019 and 2020, as the other schools, there was a drop in matriculation to UC Berkeley, went down by about 5.5% from 16% to just under 11%. And then when you look at UCLA, there's actually went up by a little bit, about a percentage and a half, from 13.12% in 2019 to 14.51% in 2020. So now let's get into where do Monta Vista students go after they graduate. So where Monta Vista students go after they graduate, as you can see from the chart here, there is a lot of interest in UCs and out-of-state schools. Out-of-state had the highest category at 38%, whether it's public or private. And then the next category was the University of California at 31%. And then for the third category, it is actually the two-year college at 14%, which is the second highest among the 5 schools. And it's not a surprise considering a very good community college, like we said before. Didnt College is actually right across the street from Monta Vista, about a walking distance. And then one of their lowest categories, just like the other schools, is the CSUs at 6%. Now that we've covered what they do after graduation, let's get into that key characteristic, which is Monta Vista's DECA program. Now, for those who are unfamiliar, DECA stands for Distributive Education Clubs of America. And essentially what DECA tries to do is they work to promote emerging young leaders for business-related fields such as marketing, finance, hospitality, and management. And they do this through participating in competitions or events that develop their presentation and real-life skills. Now, one thing that Monta Vista did stress in their DECA webinar, which was recently, is that they do try to have students in like STEM fields as well join their DECA. Now, for instance, say your child is an engineering major or they like robotics and they have a product that they want to show to the world and have go viral, they will try to invite them into DECA so that they can learn how to present that product in a business professional environment to help boost their public speaking presentation skills, so that when that happens in the future, they'll be ready and maybe that product will go viral or get taken on by a company. They even ask people who are interested in pre-med or nursing even to do presentations for hospitality. Now, when you look at the DECA numbers for Monta Vista, they're very strong. Monta Vista currently has the #1 ranked DECA program in the region, #1 ranked in the state, and 4th internationally. Even more so, the school's program also has 50% of California's competition wins and 150 top 10 finishers internationally. So just like I said for Lynbrook, where it is a very good school for students who are interested in math and math competitions, I would say Monta Vista High School is a very good school for students who are interested in business, but not just business, but also wanting to improve their public speaking and presentation skills in front of a live audience, business professional setting. So now that we have covered Monta Vista's DECA program, let's get into their academics. So for their academics, Overall, they have strong SAT scores and national merit semifinalists in comparison to other top area public high schools. Not the highest for each category, but definitely both categories are strong. For their SAT, it is 1411. And then for their national merit semifinalists, they actually increased by quite a bit. In 2020, it was 49. However, in 2021, it is increased by 14 to 63. When looking at their other academics, they had an increase in their ACT, which was 31 in 2019 and 30 in 2020. And then when you look at their GPA, 9% of students received a 4.0 GPA, and then a little over half of the students were at 3.5 to 3.99. For the last couple categories, for their AP tests, 92% received a 3 or higher, and almost half, 49%, received a 5. For their CASP, 62% were college ready in English, and 72% were college ready in math. And then lastly, their number of AP courses offered was 18. So that concludes all of the individual schools that we are covering. But now let's get into some more visuals, some statistical graphs, so you guys can get a better sense of where these schools stand next to each other. So the first one is for the UC Berkeley admission. As you can see, all of the schools decreased across the board from 2019 to 2020. However, Lynbrook's was the most decrease, as it was almost 30%, and now it is at about 8 or 9%. So although all of these schools did see decreases due to COVID-19, like we said before, Lynbrook's was the most severe. So hopefully for next year, we see increases for all the schools once the 2021 data is released. And then for the UCLA admission, it's a bit of a different story. So there were decreases in Lynbrook and Mission San Jose by about 5% from 2019 to 2020. However, the other three schools saw slight increases from about 1% to 1.5%, and they're both around about the same. So yeah, that is for the UCLA admission. But for the next statistic, it's going to be the ACT scores. Now, there is kind of a common theme here. There are 4 out of the 5 schools here definitely have like around the same numbers. They both had about 31 in 2019 and about 32 to 33 in 2020. As you can see, Lynbrook, Mission, San Jose, Monta Vista, and Saratoga almost mimic each other. The only one that's a slight outlier is Gunn High School, where they were around 28 and they decreased a little bit to 27. For our next slide, it is SAT scores. There's not a whole lot to say really about this slide. They all have very strong scores. Mission San Jose does have the highest at 1450, and Gunn is the only school with below 1400 at 1357 last year. And now for the national merit semifinalists, as you can see here, Lynbrook did have a significant increase. They almost doubled from 40 to 79. From 2020 to 2021, where Saratoga did have the most decrease from about 51 to 30, and then Mission San Jose and Monta Vista both had increases, and they're now both about the same, 63, 64, and then Gunn High stayed about the same at 35 and 34 for 2020 and 2021 respectively. Now, when looking at their CAASP, for Lynbrook and Mission San Jose, they definitely have the highest among the bunch. They both average about 80% for English and math. Saratoga's was slightly less at about 75% average for English and math. Gunn High slightly below that in the early 20s for English and math. But the one noticeable point that you can see in this graph is Monta Vista's English score is definitely the lowest out of all of them by a decent amount. Around 62% were college ready in English, according to the student profile. So that one was slightly lower than all of the other schools. Now, when you look at the AP scores for 3 or higher, not much to say about this category. They're all very strong. They all range from about 90% to 94%. And then when you dig even deeper to the students in the schools that received a 5 or higher, there was only 3 schools that reported for this, but Monta Vista was the highest at 49%, Lynbrook slightly below at 47%, and then Gunn High at 43%. So all very good schools for AP tests, whether it's for 3 or for a score 5. And now this next one is for the percentage of students who received a 4.0 GPA. This graph is a little bit incomplete, as stated in the previous slides. For Gunn High and Saratoga, they didn't report an exact stat for 4.0 GPA students. Saratoga's was weighted and they had over 4.0 GPA, so it's hard to track and compare that. Where Gunn High, they did not have a 4.0 exactly. It was only 3.76 to 4. But when you look at the 3 schools that did report an exact 4.0 GPA for students, Lynbrook's, as you can see, is the highest by a good portion at 21.2%. Monta Vista's was a little bit lower and at 9%, and then Mission San Jose was the lowest at 5%. Now for our last slide on these academics, it is the number of AP classes offered. And as you can see, Gunn High, when you look at the rest, are the highest at 26, and Mission San Jose is the next highest at 21. Just a reminder, Gunn and Mission San Jose were the only schools that offered the interesting AP courses such as AP Psych and Human Geography, and Gunn was the only school that offered AP German. So that concludes our webinar on the schools for the public high schools in the Bay Area. Now we're going to get into some Q&A session here. But before we get into the Q&A, we're going to try and get to as many questions as possible. But if we can't get to all of them, if you have any more questions, you can do 2 things. You can either join our Bay Area Schools discussion group to receive detailed answers. Just type the question into the group. You can just join it by scanning the QR code and we'll get to you with a detailed answer. Or you can check out our website and we will send your questions via email and you'll receive professional help and a response. And there's the website link below. So now let's get into some of the questions. Look at it through the chat here. Will there be another webinar about schools such as Cupertino? Yes, if there is enough interest, we are planning on doing a webinar on like the schools that just didn't make the cut, such as Cupertino and Palo Alto, Leland, and some other schools if you want as well. We have polls in our Bay Area Schools and Discussion group, and that's kind of how we gauge which topics to choose next. For instance, we had a poll last time on if they wanted a public or private school webinar, and public outweighed it. So we did a public school webinar this time. But if there is enough interest, we will definitely get to those schools as well, such as Cupertino. It's a good question. Let me try and look through the other questions. I would be interested in seeing for Pali and Los Altos. Those are also very good schools. As I said, Palo Alto just missed the cut, and Los Altos is definitely a comparative school, very close in proximity. We can do a webinar that includes schools like Los Altos as well. And then maybe even if there is interest, Los Gatos and Mountain View, because those are all the schools kind of in the Silicon Valley. I also see a question about Burlingame and Claremont. There's a lot of, I love to see a lot of interest in these other high schools. Yeah, we'll definitely host polls in our groups so that we can just poll exactly which ones we want the most and kind of do these webinars in order, maybe by geographic location or by ranking. But yeah, these are all very good suggestions. Thank you for all the suggestions. What is the cut? How did you select today's schools? So essentially, when we were looking at the data from US News and Niche, there was kind of a cutoff based off the data where it rated first tier and then like 1.5 tier and then like 2 tier. And Cupertino and like Palo Alto, Leland, they just missed the cutoff. They were more so like 1.5 tier, and these 5 schools, according to their data, they reported that it was the first tier. So that's why we made the cutoff for these 5 schools to talk about today. And then also time restraint. We could have maybe covered such as Cupertino or Palo Alto, but the webinar just would have been too long. So that's why we chose those 5. Can we get comparisons about Fremont City and Warm Springs schools? Definitely. Like I said, we can definitely look more into the Fremont City schools and Warm Springs schools and try and gather that information for a previous webinar. Are students guaranteed admission to these schools as long as they live within the designated zone? That is a great question, and yes. So essentially, as long as you live in the designated area of each school, on the school website, there should be a place where they show kind of like the district zones for people who aren't as familiar with the exact kind of borders, because it can be kind of confusing. Yes, as long as you're within those borders, you will go to that school because it is a public school. So they must admit the students in those areas if they wish to go to that school instead of like a private school. Yes. So this other question is, sorry, I missed the source. Which sources did you use for the rankings? It was US News and Niche. They both reported their own individual rankings. And if you did miss that part, a little summary, US News focuses more on, they ranked their schools more on the hard statistics such as SAT, ACT scores, and admission rates, whereas Niche focused a lot on like the overall school experience, such as student to teacher ratio. They focused heavily on, and then other aspects like number of AP courses, number of extracurriculars, and even like geographic location, like how they rank that city and if that the school is in. So those are the two websites that we got those hard rankings from in the beginning, was US News and Niche. We're gonna try and get into some more questions. Yeah, so for another question, which is which Silicon Valley public high schools have the best debate programs? For the schools that we talked about today, Monta Vista also has a very good debate program. Like I said, for DECA, they're very strong at just kind of like a business setting, professional setting where you can present in front of people and do a really good job. The Monta Vista, I would say, is probably the best, definitely the best out of the five that we covered today for their speech and debate program. They're very good at having those extracurriculars where students present in front of live audiences professionally.
Okay, hi everyone. So I noticed that, hi everyone, I'm Judy, and also I work with Kate to research all those high schools as well as middle schools. And I noticed a lot of you are interested in the magnet schools, and we actually do some research about those. And in terms of the location of those magnet schools, especially in the South Bay area, we do have a lot of magnet schools, especially for the like. For example, we have Bullis Charter in the Los Altos district, and we also have the Discovery Charter School and the North Star. All of those magnet schools are really good, especially in the academic performance. And if you want to go to those magnet schools, no matter in which school district you are in, you can, of course, to sign up for the lottery. And once you are so lucky to be assigned, you will have the chance to go to those magnet schools. And we based on our research, we found that all those magnet schools are really good, especially for the academic performance and also for the faculty qualities. And how is a Iverton School District. So for that one, actually, we have done some research about that. However, if the like the Lynbrook, Gunn High, and Mission San Jose is as the first tier schools, and for the Iverton, we will think it is a second tier because of the college matriculation, and also about the student clubs, and as well as for the faculty degrees. So if you're interested in all the other schools, for example, the school districts, as well as other schools in specific, you can all list down on the chat box. So we will collect all those information and to deal with it later in our following webinars. And how do you start to think about pathing your child from elementary, middle school to then be ready for this competitive and intense high schools? So actually we have, so for this question, I think we can combine it with this one. Do specific universities have quotas per specific schools? Or if you were to target Berkeley, for example, which schools are best opportunity, or does it matter? So for these two schools, it's like how you prepare your children from the very stage from elementary to high school. And we believe there are different ways and we have different goals at each stage. So for elementary, we believe the most important thing is to find a school that can best make your children to have a good study habit, because the study habit cannot be raised or be changed a lot in the middle school and high school. And for middle school, we think it's actually really important, and we will have a very detailed webinar about it in the following part, because we know like for different school district, Cupertino or like Berkeley or like Palo Alto, every school district have their own path. For example, if you want to learn algebra at the 7th grade or 8th grade, or does it really matters? And for those questions and how you plan for your children's middle school can actually influence how your children will perform in the high school, because at the high school the track is very strict. You cannot jump and you cannot choose courses that you do not take the prerequisite courses beforehand. So we believe that at the middle school you need to plan very carefully, and when your children are stepping into the high school, the most important thing is to make sure the extra curriculum is at the very like advanced stage. For example, if you want to apply for Berkeley or if you want to apply for other Ivy League schools, you need to make sure that your children are definitely find what they are interested in, and they have some national awards or at least some very impressive experience around around that field, so as to make your children stand out. And for the Berkeley, especially for those UC universities, we are actually, like as we mentioned in our webinar, we found that there is a very obvious trend, that is for the Asian students, the admission rate is going lower. So the reason is because UC college are accepting like students with more diversity, and the second reason is that they prefer students from the external states, so that the tuition fee will be higher for those external state students. So that will be the two reasons why from 2019 the students from no matter Mission San Jose or Lynbrook, the admission rate is going lower or decreasing. So in this case, we have two options. The first one is that we can try like UC Berkeley, like for the current or for the newest US news ranking, UCLA is surpassing UCB. So maybe UCLA could be another choice for students. And the second thing is that in this case, maybe we can try some second tier high school and to be the top students in those schools. And in that case, we can secure our spot to go to those UC Berkeley schools and others, because UC Berkeley really cares about your GPA, and they also care about whether you can perform well in your school, in your district. So maybe that will be another choice. And also we actually found that some students, not for like Asian students, but for some other students, they will choose to go to college, CC, like college, community college first, and then they will transfer. So if you look at the transfer numbers for those high schools and for those UC universities, you will find that there is a trending of the increase for those transfer students. And is Dottie Valley High in San Ramon comparable to these 5 schools? Of course. So that will be a brand new school that we will talk about for the Tri-Valley, for Dublin, Pleasanton, as well as for San Remo, because Dottie Valley High is doing really good from 2015, especially for no matter from the students matriculation or from the the high school like performance, for example, AMC 10, AMC 12, AMY, or like all those physics or biology competitions, all of those competitions, we can see teams from Dottie Valley High. So we believe Dottie Valley High is doing really good. However, we also talk with students from Dottie Valley High, and they mentioned that the competition within the school is really severe because there are limited AP courses and all those honor courses. So so students need to like prepare in a very stage from the ninth grade in order to enroll in those very advanced courses to be more prepared. Yes, so any other questions? So if not, actually, if you are interested in anything if you are interested in any other schools, no matter high school, middle school or elementary school, you can always leave your comment here. For example, you want to hear more about high school or the middle school or elementary school, we will choose and like to order our webinars based on your preference. So what's your opinion of college prep schools? So we believe that it really depends on children, and before you enter high school, we believe students nowadays, they do have some understanding about which path they want to choose, and they also have connection with their like the older students to see how they plan their their life. So we believe first of all, there are like in general, three kinds of students. The first one is the genius. Like no matter in public schools or private schools, they can definitely find the position and to stand out. And the second thing, the second kind of children is like, well, they need parents and teachers to help them to stand out. They have the ability, but they just need people to supervise them. So in terms of these children, we believe it's better to go to private school at first to have a very solid base for the academic and for the habits, and later they can go back to the public schools and to prepare, because for public schools are known for diverse clubs, diverse student activities, and also like because the student group is larger, it is easier to stand out. However, the third kind of children is that it's better for them to start from private school and go all the way, like for example, you start from Harker and you go all the way to Harker, or you start from basis and then you go all the way to basic high schools, because they are more like they want to they are getting used to a very like a pure environment in order to like to prepare for their high school, prepare for the applications. So private school do have their like advantages, because like they can get more attention from teachers. So if they cannot organize themselves and they maybe need more help, we think private school will be a better choice. Okay. Great. So we are accepting your comment and your wishes during the webinar. And if you still want to talk with us in person, we are always online for our parent and the school discussion group. So we will have our next webinar, so 2 weeks later at the same time. So if you are interested, you can just check your email and we will send you the notifications about that. Okay, great. So thank you all for joining today's webinar, and we hope like we can like help children together to find the best path for them to become greater again. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.